Welcome in everybody, I'm Joey. Nowadays, there is an abundance of racing games, whether you like arcade physics, open worlds, circuit racing sims, or just plain ramming people. There is a game for all of us. It's become nearly a $10 billion industry and is only expected to grow. That's enough money to buy yourself one Fanatec wheel. I kid, but they are pretty expensive. With all the options out on the market, have you ever asked yourself, where did all these games come from? Today, we're going to take a look back at the racing game that started it all. To do that, we need to start in 1941. Yeah, that far back, and the games looked a bit different. Around this time, electromechanical games like Drivemobile were all the craze. In Drivemobile, the player uses a steering wheel to control a model car driving over a road that's painted on a metal drum. The goal was to keep the car centered as the road shifts left and right. To put it simply in modern terms, caveman shit. But if you ask me, it's pretty cool. A couple decades later, electromechanical games evolved by incorporating elements of video projection, one of which was a Japanese game called Indy 500, or as it was called in the US, Speedway. Decked out with a full-size wheel and accelerator pedal, you might say Speedway was the first racing rig. The object of the game was to weave your way through two lanes of traffic without getting into an accident with other cars on the track. Speedway was the best-selling game of its time, and it even influenced the founder of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, when he created Gran Trak 10 in 1974. Gran Trak 10 is commonly referred to as the first car racing video game. The player drives a car along a racetrack from a top-down perspective, avoiding walls and trying to pass as many checkpoints as possible before time runs out. Like Speedway, the game is controlled with a steering wheel and accelerator, but Atari added a brake pedal and a 4-speed gear stick. That's 3 more gears than Teslas have today. Pretty cool. But the video game that revolutionized the genre and still has a massive impact on racing games today was released in 1982. That game is Pole Position. Developed by Namco, Pole Position was unlike any racing game that had come before it, because up to this point, no one had seen graphics this advanced, and it was thanks to its 16-bit microprocessor. It offered a completely new perspective on racing games, quite literally, because you know that chase cam that every modern racing game uses as a default view? Well, that started with Pole Position. Fans of 1981's Turbo, I look forward to your angry comments, but come on, that's a helicopter view at best. Pole Position was also the first racing game to feature a real-life track. Maybe you've heard of Japan's Fuji Speedway? Back in the day, it was an incredibly popular track after hosting the final race in the 1976 Formula One season. It was a particularly eventful race because James Hunt earned enough points to swipe the world championship away from Niki Lauda. Now I have to say, the background scenery wasn't exactly a spitting image of the track, but the turns and certainly some of the billboards were spot on. So let's talk gameplay. When you boot up Pole Position, you're immediately dropped into a qualifying session. The goal? To set a quick enough lap time to qualify for one of the 8 spots on the Grand Prix grid. Once the player qualifies, they're thrusted into a 4-lap race. Complete each lap within the time limit or it's game over. Sounds easy enough, right? How about no? And this is one of my favorite parts of the game. It's actually challenging. Memorizing the track layout and taking the optimal speed through the corners is critical, unless your goal is to pull a Grosjean into one of the billboards. If only he played more Pole Position, he might still be in F1. But in all seriousness, the game requires racing knowledge. And you also need finesse. For example, accelerating mid-corner can cause the car to become unsettled. To remedy the oversteer, the player needs to turn into the slide to regain grip. Driving on the edge of losing control is what makes real-life racing so exciting, and pole position was the first to simulate that feeling and adrenaline rush of laying it all on the line. In a way, pole position was the first racing physics model. At the time, Computer and Video Games magazine was saying things like, "Simply the most exhilarating driving simulation game on the market. Can't match the speed, thrills, and skill behind this new racing game. Thrills to compare with the real racetrack." It's safe to say the public liked the gameplay too, because it sold like crazy. It was the highest grossing game in Japan for 1982, in Europe for 1983, and the US for both 83 and 84. But like any game, success didn't come without a bit of criticism. A retrospective review done by Eurogamer back in 2007, I think sums it up pretty well. In the review they said, "Those dedicated will eventually reap success, but most will be deterred by the difficulty." I'd throw out there, that's exactly the point of a racing simulation game. Memorizing the track, practicing racing lines, finding the edge, chasing the perfect lap. That's what it's all about. And what's crazy to me is while I was playing pole position to get ready for this video, I couldn't help but notice the impact that this game has had on modern racing games. We spoke earlier about pole position being the first racing game to implement qualifying. You can probably already tell where I'm going with this, but it's a staple of games like Gran Turismo now, in which starting positions in online races are determined by your qualifying time. Or what about sticky grass? If you've played Forza Motorsport, chances are you've encountered grass that's seemingly been covered in glue. Or at least, I hope it's glue. Get off the track, Ron. Anyways, that's an element of pole position. If your car drives over the curb or onto the grass, you'll slow down a considerable amount. It might be a bit of a stretch, but puddles were kind of an early element of weather. Now we get fully dynamic weather with tires that react to temperature changes. Then there's the recreating of real-life tracks. Pole position started it with Fuji, and modern developers have taken it a step further. Now they're modeling tracks to be one-to-one replicas. They're creating multiple variations of a single track with living crowds and some pretty cool backdrops. And like I mentioned before, the chase cam, the perspective almost every racing game uses as a default today, started with pole position. Although there were racing games that came before it, I think of pole position as ground zero, or the Big Bang if you will. It was the start of racing games as we know them today, and 40 years later, we can still find traces of its impact. With its massive success as an arcade game, pole position was migrated to home systems like the Atari 2600 and Commodore 64, and was followed by a sequel, Pole Position 2, which added 3 new tracks, one of which was Suzuka, another real-life track that is today home to the Formula 1 Japanese Grand Prix. Pole Position was also converted into a board game and even a 13-episode cartoon series. If you're interested in racing and think it might be something you'd want to watch, well, just know that it's more about crime fighters and talking cars than anything that has to do with the game. Aside from the weird cartoon series, if you're interested in playing the game, it's actually available on the Nintendo Switch. If you search up Arcade Archives Pole Position on the store, you can pick it up for $8. According to IGN, it's also available on PS4. So if you don't have a Switch, you can check over there too. But if you do pick it up on Switch, let me know. They've added 2 new modes. In Caravan mode, you complete as many laps as possible in 5 minutes, which is a fun twist, but my favorite is the high score mode. It's pretty much the same as the classic game, but you can see the online rankings while you play. My high score right now is 41,940, so let me know what you get. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, and if you want to see more of my content, remember to subscribe for videos just like this one. Alright, I'll see you soon. Bye everybody.